Without objection.
I now move to proceed to calendar number 154.
Clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to HJ Res 66, approving the renewal of import restrictions contained in the Burmese Freedom and Democracy Act of 2003.
Mr. President, I have a cloture motion at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 154, HJ Res 66, a joint resolution approving the renewal of import restrictions contained in the Burmese Freedom and Democracy Act of 2003, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent the names not be read.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the vote on the motion to invoke cloture occur at 5:30 on Monday, September 12th, that the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived.
Objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business day, it adjourn until 2 p.m. on Monday, September 12th. Following the prayer and pledge, the journal proceedings be approved today at the morning hour be deemed expired. The time of the two leaders be reserved for use later in the day. Following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business until 4:30 on Monday, with senators permitted to speak for 10 minutes each. At 4:30 on Monday, the Senate would resume consideration of the motion to proceed to the joint resolution regarding Burma.
Without objection.
There will be a roll call vote at 5:30 on Monday on the motion to vote cloture on the motion to proceed to HJ Res 66. Additionally, there will be a 9/11 remembrance ceremony on Monday on the east front steps of the Capitol. Members will gather at the rotunda about 10 till 6, so people should be here in time for the vote because we'll have to close it pretty quickly. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the briefs order following remarks of Senator Warner.
Without objection. Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I am afforded this opportunity to address the Senate and recognize that I may be all that's standing in front of the presiding officer and the folks who do such a good job of maintaining order in the Senate of adjournment, so I'll try to make my remarks relatively brief. Mr. President, I rise again today to honor another great federal employee, Michael Smith. As the Director of Strategic Source Program Office within the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, Mr. Smith has saved U.S. taxpayers an estimated $750 million over a 3-year period by merging the buying power of 22 different components within DHS. Mr. Smith recognizes, which I also recognize as governor, I know the presiding officer did when he was governor of the great state of West Virginia, that centralized procurement operations is a critical step to creating efficiencies and savings in government. As governor, I fostered the development of the state's centralized procurement system, EVA, and mandated that all state entities use that system for purchases. For example, we were able to reduce what we paid for light bulbs in Virginia from 38 cents to 23 cents. Now, that didn't close a $6 billion shortfall by itself, but we buy a lot of light bulbs in Virginia, as I know they do in West Virginia as well. Mr. Smith has taken a similar approach at the federal level, and his accomplishment was no small feat. After analyzing the purchasing data at DHS, he identified several critical security products and services that could be consolidated for purchasing, such as ammunition, uniforms, and communication equipment. He brought together the program and acquisition staff of 22 DHS components, including the Transportation Security Administration and the Customs and Border Protection, to agree to work together. Mr. Smith's supervisors said that he listened to the different needs of the DHS components and was able to lead them to common solutions to meet all their individual requirements under a new contract. According to Nick Nyack, the DHS Chief Procurement Officer, quote, Mr. Smith led a new way of doing business, where agencies provided a letter detailing their financial and policy commitment to initiative to obtain the best pricing for the government. Mr. Smith's collaborative approach has been so successful that the White House has asked him to introduce his methodology to other larger agencies. I hope my colleagues will join me in honoring Mr. Smith for his excellent work. I'm also proud to recognize him as a Virginian, a Marine Corps veteran, and someone who has dedicated the past 28 years to public service. Now, Mr. President, before I relinquish the floor, I do want to take a couple minutes on two other items. One, as the presiding officer this morning, I heard a number of senators come forward and recognize that, as others have over the last few days, that we're approaching the 10th anniversary of 9/11. I'm sure all of us here remember where we were that Tuesday morning. I personally recall that it was in a campaign for governor at that point. Just gotten a haircut, and the big debate was 3 days away, and when I first got the news. Suddenly the big debate didn't seem that terribly important. Within an hour, I'd been at my campaign headquarters, saw the plane crash into the Pentagon, and the smoke billowing out. Now, over the last 10 years, I think this country has made remarkable strides in making sure that Americans are safer than they were 10 years ago. We've seen a whole new series of collaboration between our intelligence service agencies. We've seen greater collaboration here at home amongst our law enforcement. I think as we all come about on Sunday and we reflect back on the last 10 years and the horrors that were brought to this country, I hope we'll all say a little prayer for those members of our military and those members of the intelligence community over the last 10 years for the magnificent work they've done in trying to make our country, and actually making our country, much safer. But I think as well as we see reports even today of possible threats, that we recognize that we can never be 100% safe. Remember, during my tenure as governor, within the first year, we in Virginia and the district in Maryland were caught in almost 3 weeks of remarkable terror with what became later known as the sniper incidents. For a lot of that time, we didn't know whether this was a possible terrorist incident or was it what it turned out to be, two deranged lone wolf assassins wreaking havoc across most of the mid-Atlantic. I think one of the things we need to bear in mind is that while we and our government will do everything possible to keep safe, we also have to rely upon individuals as they spot incidents that seem unusual, their collaboration with law enforcement. But even with that collaboration, there may be times when, whether homegrown or foreign, some lone wolf-type assassin or terrorist could slip through. And I think it's important that the American people, 10 years after that enormous tragedy, that we as a people are more resilient and that we cannot allow a single act of terror to change the way we live, our freedoms, our civil liberties, because candidly, there's no way any terrorist can inflict so much individual harm that it can do damage to our country. But if they do spread fear or make us as a people change the way we interact, the kind of respect we have for each other, the respect we have for our freedoms, then they will be more successful than any individual incident of harm. So I join, I know, with the presiding officer and with all the folks who work here and so many of the young pages as we go into this weekend of reflection. I hope that many of the folks who are listening today will take a moment and not only reflect back on that 10th anniversary, but also do an act of service. I think this is a great time for us as Americans to show service back to our community. So this is a time I know I'll be in the Pentagon on Sunday morning with where we were hit in Virginia. Pentagon is a national institution, but it is, we in Virginia are proud that it resides in our Commonwealth, to be with some who lost loved ones on that day. But I'll also be doing acts of community service through this weekend as well to make sure that we show that great spirit of America. I also like to take one final moment, and I'll be very brief, and this is, I want to echo something my colleague from Tennessee said, and something that the presiding officer has been very active in over the last few months. We all heard the President last night, and some of us may agree or disagree with all the actions the President laid out. I do think there are things that we can do as a government targeted to help spur economic growth and job creation. It needs to be our top priority. But I do think we have to recognize that there isn't a single silver bullet, that the major tools that government uses during a period of economic turmoil, we've actually already used. Central governments can lower interest rates. Governments can use federal stimulus. In our major way, we've used both of those tools. Again, there can be certain additional things we can do around the edges, but one of the most important things we can do to get this economy restarted is generate confidence. Confidence amongst the American consumers and the American people that we in Washington aren't going to mess things up any worse. Confidence amongst our business community, who particularly larger businesses are sitting on $2.5 trillion in cash. They are in financially a better position today than they were back in 2008 when we first experienced the beginnings of the financial crisis, to get that money off the sidelines, reinvested in America. And one of the most important things we can do, and the President touched upon it last night, but there have been a group of bipartisan senators who've been working on this for a long period of time, is to recognize that unless we get our long-term debt problems under control, then I don't think we'll see the resurgence of confidence that this economy and this country needs. So I look forward to working with the President and members in both parties and targeted investments. But I hope as well that with the presiding officer, with my friend the senator from Tennessee, my friend the senator from Georgia and others, that we can work with this so-called new supercommittee to urge them to be bold, and that if they be bold and we put in place over a 10-year frame a long-term deficit reduction plan that I hope would reduce the deficit by at least $4 trillion, encompassing what we've already done, that plan, phased in over a decade, will do as much to generate job creation in the short, medium, and long term as any other action. So I look forward to that work ahead. I look forward to reflecting back with all my fellow Americans about both the sacrifice, tragedy, but also the amazing resilience of the American people in the last decade. And I again compliment Mr. Smith and so many great federal employees for the work they do. And with that, Mr. President, I look forward to going through one more item of business before we recess. I ask unanimous consent that the Banking Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-1239 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report.
S-1239, a bill to provide for a Medal of Appropriate Design to be awarded by the President to the memorials established at the 3 sites honoring the men and women who perished as a result of the terrorist attacks in the United States on September 11, 2001.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be read a third time and passed, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to the bill be placed in the record at the appropriate time and place, as if read.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I do yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday.
That wraps up the week for the U.S. Senate. Next week, CQ reports that Majority